Imagine living a life where the number in your bank account doesn't decide how you feel when you wake up in the morning. Imagine walking through a world drowning in advancements, comparison, and the relentless pressure to earn more, spend more, become more, and feeling some so rare it almost doesn't have a name anymore. Enough, not rich, not reddered, not free from all financial responsibility. Just enough, deeply, truly, completely enough. You still see the priest's reason. You still watch other people buying things you don't have. You still know your account balance isn't what you wish it was. But it no longer eats you from the inside. It no longer follows you into sleep. It no longer is heaving in your chest at 3 a.m. when the house is quiet and your mind is louder than it has any right to be. But let's be honest. How many times have you opened a banking app and felt your mood drop instantly? How many Sunday evenings have you spent calculating and recalculating numbers that never seem to add up the way you need them to? How many times have you watched someone else's life on a screen and felt that quiet chorus of certainty that you are behind, falling behind, always somehow behind? Most people don't have a money problem. They have an enough problem. They don't suffer because they have too little. They suffer because they have been trained since birth to believe that whatever they have is not quite it, not quite enough, not quite yet. One promotion, one raise, one more year of saving, one more investment, and then they'll feel it. That psyche, that peace, that arrival they have been running toward their entire adult life. But here's the truth Seneca wrote 2,000 years ago, and behavioral economics confirms in study after study today. The finish line moves. Every single time you reach it, moves. Not because you are failing, because the system was designed that way. The anxiety is not og in the economy. It is the peer. A person at peace with what they have is the most dangerous possible consumer. And so the machine works night and day to make sure that person never changes. But they do exist. They have always existed. And today we are going to become them. We are not just talking about budgeting. We are not talking about cutting lats or optimizing spreadsheets. We are talking about something the Stoics called sufficient wealth. A complete philosophical revolution in how a human being relates to money, not as a destination, but as a tool. Not as a measure of worth, but as a servant. Not as the sanko of your sicker, but as the shadow of something far more solid that you already carry inside you. Stay with me. What we are about to explore will not just change how you think about money. It will change what you think money is for. And once that shifts, everything shifts. If you find value in this work, in the depth, the clarity, and the tools to live with less anxiety and more freedom, there is one simple thing I will ask. Hit subscribe. It is free. It costs you nothing, and it is the kind of support that keeps this content alive for everyone who needs it. It is not the amount. It never was. That is the first and most important shift in perception you need to make if you want to stop living in financial anxiety. You think it is the salary that is too low. You think it is the debt that is too high. You think it is the gap between where your account sits and where you believe it needs to be before you can finally exhale. But that is just the surface. What really creates financial anxiety is not the number. It is your relationship to the number. It is the story your mind tells the moment your eyes land on it. The invisible calculation that happens in under a second. A lightning-fast comparison between what is and what you have decided must be. Seneca wrote in his letters to Lucius something that stopped me completely the first time I read it. He said it is not the man woe is too little, woe is poor, but the man woe hankers after more. Read that again, slowly. Not too little, hankers after more. The poverty Seneca is describing is not in the wallet, it is in the wanting. It is in the perpetual forward lean of a mind that cannot rest in what is present, because it is always already reaching for what is next. Think about it. Two people can have identical bank balances. One feels grateful, stable, secure. The other feels anxious, insufficient, behind. The balance didn't change. The relationships to the balance did. That difference is not personality. It is not luck. It is not some people having more and some having less. It is the difference between a mind that has been trained to seek sufficiency and a mind that has been trained to seek more. And here is the uncomfortable truth that most people never reach. You were not born with financial anxiety. You were taught it, somewhere between your first toy commercial and your 100th social media. Scroll of belief was installed in you as quietly and as completely as operating forthwith. The belief that your crank state is insufficient, that the people around you are ahead, that the things you do not own are the things that would make your life real. Carl Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. That is exactly what financial anxiety is for most people. Not a rational response to genuine scarcity. A program running in the back. A script installed without your propensions that says whatever you have is not enough and whatever you or is not enough and the only truism is more. But a script can be rewritten, and the rewrite begins not with your bank account. It begins with your awareness. The next time you feel that familiar drop, that tightening in your chest when a bill arrives or a price has risen or someone else appears to have what you don't, pause. Don't calculate. Don't spiral. Just ask this single question. Am I responding to reality or to the story I have been taught to tell about reality? That question is not comfort. That question is the beginning of freedom. Because once you see the program, you can choose not to run it. Once you identify the anxiety as learned rather than inevitable, you stop being its passenger and start being its observer. And the observer, as Seneca knew, and as every serious psychological tradition since has confirmed, is always calmer than the reactor. That is not indifference to money. That is mastery of your relationships to it. Remember, the financial anxiety that feels like yours may not be yours at all. It may be borrowed, inherited, absorbed, and borrowed things can be returned. The moving finish line and why your brain will never let you arrive. Here is something that the financial industry spends billions of dollars hoping you will never understand about yourself. Your brain has a feature. Psychologists call it the hedonic treadmill that ensures you will adapt to every improvement in your circumstances and return to roughly the same baseline level of satisfaction within a relatively short period of time. In plain language, the raise that was supposed to fix everything will stop feeling significant within 6 moves. The car that was supposed to make you feel successful will become just a car within a year. The house that was supposed to be the arrival will become the place where you notice what still needs fixing within 18 moves of moving in. This is not a personal failing. This is neurological engineering. Your brain is designed to habituate, to normalize, to push the goalposts forcefully when you reach them, because a brain that is easily satisfied is a brain that stops striving, and a brain that stops striving has historically been a brain that dies. The problem is that this ancient survival mechanism is now being weaponized by a $5 trillion global advertising industry that understands your neurology better than you do and has built an entire civilization around keeping the treadmill moving. Seneca saw this dynamic with extraordinary clarity despite living 2 millennia before neuroscience had words for it. He wrote, "Nothing is enough for the man to own us too little." That line is not just philosophy. It is a clinical description of what happens when a mind that has never been trained in sufficiency encounters a world that is specifically designed to exploit its insatiable ability. Think about the last time you made a significant purchase that you believed would change how you felt. Maybe it was a phone. Maybe it was a piece of clothing. Maybe it was an entire home renovation, or a career change, or a move to a new city. In the weeks before you acquired it, your mind presented it as the truism, as the thing that would bring the relief, the stability, the feeling of having finally arrived, and then you acquired it, and the relief came. For a moment, for a week, for a season if you were lucky. And then something else appeared on the horizon. Something else your crunk circumstances lacked. Something else that would, this time for certain, be the thing that finally made everything feel right. That is not you being ungrateful. That is the treadmill doing exactly what it was built to do. But here is what Seneca understood that most modern people never reach. The answer to the treadmill is not to run faster. It is to step off, not by becoming poor, not by rejecting material comfort, not by pretending that financial psychic is irrelevant, by changing the question. Most people spend their entire financial lives asking, how do I get more? The Stoic question, the question that actually has an answer, is how do I defraud enough? That question has an answer. It is a real answer. It is an answer that does not move every time you reach it. And the moment you begin to seriously pursue that answer, your entire relationship with money changes. Not because your income changes, not because your expense change, because your mind changes. And your mind is where all financial anxiety was created in the first place. Aristotle said knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. In the kinks of money, knowing yourself means knowing the difference between what you genuinely need and what you have been manipulated into wanting. That distinction is not always comfortable to examine, but it is the most valuable financial audit you will ever conduct. Remember, the finish line that keeps moving was never yours. Someone else drew it, and someone else keeps moving it. You are allowed to draw your own. Seneca's most radical financial teaching, and why your bank will never tell you about it. Seneca was one of the wealthiest men in ancient Rome. He was an advisor to an emperor. He owned multiple properties. He lived in extraordinary material comfort by any era standard. Most people don't know that about Seneca. They imagine the Stoics as ascetics, austere figures in rough clothing eating bread on stone floors and nodding approvingly at their own suffering. That is not what Stoicism taught, and it is especially not what Seneca taught. Seneca taught something far more dangerous and far more liberating. He taught that the problem is not having wealth. The problem is needing it. He wrote, and this is perhaps the single most important financial sentence ever admitted to writing, "It is a great wealth to us all to live frugally with a contented mind." Not to be poor, to live frugally with a contented mind. The distinction is everything. Frugality in the Stoic sense is not deprivation. It is not felon punishment. It is not the anxious minimizing of expense that most people call budgeting. It is the active intentional choice to consume only what genuinely serves your deepest values, and to find in that restraint not loss, but a profound and surprising freedom. Here is the thing that most people miss entirely when they think about spending less. They think it means having less. But every unnecessary purchase is not just a withdrawal from your bank account. It is a withdrawal from your attention, from your time, from your mental energy, from the cognitive space that could have been devoted to something that actually matters to you. The average person in a developed economy is managing, consciously or unconsciously, several hundred purchase dodgets that require their labor to acquire, that encrypt their space to store, that encode their attention to maintain, that encode their financial results to ensure or repregird or upgrade. Every one of those objects costs not just money but life. Seneca wrote perhaps the most devastating sentence in the history of personal finance without ever intending it as financial advice. He wrote it as not that we have a wartime to live, but that we waste a great deal of it. He was talking about time, but he might as well have been talking about money, because in the economy of a human life they are the same thing. You do not buy things with money. You buy things with the hours of your life that you traded for that money. And when you see a purchase in those terms, not as a number and app, but as a quantity of your finite, unrepeatable or plausible life, the question of to buy it becomes profoundly different. Is this object worth 3 hours of my life? Is this subscription worth 1 hour per move of my existence on earth? Is this upgrade worth the weeks of effort I exchange for the money required to purchase it? Most purchases do not survive that question. And the owns that do. The owns that are genuinely worth the hours of your life. Those you buy without guilt, without anxiety, without the corrosive feeling that you should have spent differently. This is what Seneca meant by sufficient wealth. Not a number, not an income level, not a net worth tracket. A relationship with your results so clear, so intentional, so aligned with your genuine values that the anxiety about money dissolves not because you have more, but because you need less and you know exactly why. That is not poverty. That is one of the rarest forms of richness available to a human being. One practical preaches what we might call the life hours audit. For 1 week before every non-essential purchase, calculate not the price in currency, but the price in life hours. Divide the cost by your effective hourly earnings and ask yourself honestly, is what I am about to reap worth that quantity of my one finite life? You will not become an ascetic. You will not stop spending. But your spending will become so intentional, so aligned with what you genuinely value, that the financial anxiety, born largely from the unconscious guilt of spending on things that do not actually matter to you, will begin quietly to dissolve. Remember, you do not manage money, you manage life. And the moment you see that clearly, every financial decision becomes something completely different. The anxiety is not about scarcity, it is about comparison. And this is where the real work lies. Most people believe their financial anxiety is rational. They believe it is a response to real and genuine insufficiency. They believe that if their income were higher, or their debt were low, or their savings were larger, the anxiety would naturally resolve. But research tells a different and far more disturbing story. Studies in behavioral economics consistently show that once basic needs are met, once genuine scarcity is no longer the issue. The primary driver of financial anxiety is not absolute wealth. It is relative position. It is where you believe you stand in comparison to the people around you. In other words, your financial anxiety is largely not about your money. It is about their money, or more precisely about the story your mind tells about their money. The colleague who drives a better car, the friend who posts a holiday you couldn't afford, the family member who appears to have arrived in 5 years, what you are still working toward. These comparisons are not information, they are poison. And in the social media era, they have been concentrated and weaponized to a degree that no previous human generation ever had to survive. Seneca wrote with a precision that feels almost prophetic, given that he died 14 centuries before the first Instagram account. Associate with those who will make a better man of you. Welcome those whom you yourself can improve. He understood that your reference group, the people whose lives you use as the measuring stick for your own, is not a neutral fact of your environment. It is a choice. And it is one of the most economical financial choices you will ever make. Think about this. The person who compares their financial situation to their immediate social circle will live in perpetual anxiety if that circle is wealthier than them. The person who compares their situation to the global population, to the reality that by every historical and geographical standard most people reading this are extraordinarily wealthy will feel something entirely different. Not guilt, not forcing attitude, just perspective. The kind of perspective that allows the anxiety to breathe and in breathing to dissolve. Carl Jung said everything that irritates us about others can lead us to an understanding of ourselves. What irritates us most in the kingdom of money is the appearance of others having more. And what that irritation reveals when we examine it honestly is not that we need more. It reveals where we have confused net worth with self-worth. And that confusion is the root of almost all financial anxiety that is not rooted in genuine material scarcity. Net worth is a number. It can be calculated. It can increases or decreases. It is affected by forces entirely outside your control. Inflation markets, interest rates, economic cycles that no individual human being, regardless of how hard they work, can fully master. Self-worth is not a number. It cannot be calculated. It does not increase or decrease with the market. It is not affected by inflation. It is the bedrock sense of your own value as a human being. A value that the Stoics located not in wealth or step or the opinions of others, but in virtue, in how you chose to live, in the alignment between your values and your actions. When you separate those two things, when you stop using your bank balance as a proxy for your worth as a human being, something extraordinary happens to your financial anxiety. Shrinks. Not because your finances improved, because the question changed. One powerful practice for this is what we might call a comparison fast. For 30 days, actively remove or limit every digital that triggers financial comparison. Curate your social media with the same intentionality you would pap to your diet. Because comparison is not neutral impanation. Comparison is a substance, and like all substances, it has a dose at which it becomes toxic. Seneca practiced this intentionally. He would periodically withdraw from the social milieu of wealthy Rome, from the banquets and the deplies and the content performance offsted, not because he couldn't afford them, but because he had learned that his peace was incompatible with continual exposure to them. That is not weakness. That is one of the most sophisticated forms of financial self-fund management available. Remember, your reference group is a choice, and it is the choice with the most direct and immediate impact on your financial anxiety of any decision you will make this year. Choose it accordingly. Voluntary hardship, and the most counterintuitive financial practice Seneca ever taught. Here is something Seneca actually did that most modern financial advisors would consider borderline irrational, and that the Stoics considered an absolute incumbent for financial freedom. Periodically and deliberately, he chose to live as if he had nothing, not because he had lost everything, not as a spiritual performance, as a practice, as a training tool, as the most effective inoculation available against the fear of poverty, which the Stoics correctly identified as the deepest driver of financial anxiety in any person who has something to lose. Seneca described this practice in his letters. He would spend several days eating the simplest possible food, wearing his rugged clothing, eliminating every comfort that his wealth normally prived. And at the end of those days, he would ask himself one question: is this the condition I feared? And the answer, almost always, was no. This is fine. This is manageable. This is not the catastrophe my financial anxiety told me it would be. That realization is not just philosophically interesting, it is neurologically transformative. Financial anxiety derives much of its power from the imagination of worst cases that have never been tested. The mind that has never experienced genuine simplicity imagines it as devastation. The mind that has voluntarily experienced it knows the truth, that human beings can thrive on remarkably little, that the baseline of a decent human life is far on than consumer culture would have you believe, and that most of what you fear losing is not what you genuinely need. This is not masochism. This is what modern psychologists call exposure therapy and what the Stoics simply called wisdom. Because the truth about financial anxiety that nobody in the personal finance industry has any commercial interest in telling you. Most of your anxiety is not about the present. It is about an imagined future. A future in which something goes wrong and you cannot cope. A future in which the money runs out and you are left without the resolve to maintain the life you have built. A future that your conscious mind knows is unlike it, but that your nervous system treats with all the urgency of an immediate physical threat. The Stoic practice of voluntary hardship dismantles that future sene from the inside. by choosing simplicity temporarily. You discover in your nervous system, not just in your mind, that you can handle it, that the floor isn't than you feared, that the catastrophe your anxiety has been rehearsing is not in fact a catastrophe. That discovery does more for financial anxiety than any amount of money in a savings account. Because it built on money is always conditional. It depends on the market, on the economy, on your employer, on your health, on 1,000 variables outside your control. Psychic built on the knowledge that you can cope with less. That is unconditional, that is yours, that cannot be taken by a session or a job loss or an unexpected expense. One practical approach is a Moogly Simplicity Day. On a Moog, choose one day where you spend as close to nothing as possible. Eat simply. Avoid all digital commerce. Turn off the feeds that generate desire. Spend the day in the activities that cost nothing. Walking, reading, talking to people you love, existing in the present moment without purchasing anything in it. The point is not the money saved. The point is what you discover about yourself in the absence of spending, which is almost always that you are more than fine, that the baseline is not deprivation, that enough, real enough, is closer than you thought. Aristotle said we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence then is not an act but a habit. The same is true of sufficiency. Practice being enough and slowly, steadily, irresistibly, you become someone for whom enough is real. Remember, the fear of poverty is more destructive than poverty itself. And the only way to dissolve that fear is not to accumulate enough to outrun it. It is to look it in the face and discover that it is smaller than you believed. The inevitable cost of wanting more and what it is actually doing to your life. Most people calculate use of things they buy. Almost nobody calculates the cost of wanting. But wanting has a cost. And it is enormous. Every object you desire but do not have occupies mental real estate. It sits somewhere in the architecture of your attention. Not always consciously but always present. Always generating a low-level signal that says you are incomplete. That says you have not yet arrived. That says the version of your life that will finally feel good is still somewhere ahead of where you currently stand. Multiply that by every object, every income level, every step marker, every financial milestone that your mind is crinkly holding as the condition for your peace. That is not ambition. That is a tax on your consciousness that you are paying every single day, you are aware of it or not. Seneca wrote, if you want to make a man happy, add not to his possessions, but take away from his desires. That is among the most economically radical sentences ever written. It inverts the entire premise of consumer civilization. It says the path to financial happiness is not acquisition. It is subtraction, not of possessions, of desires. And here is what makes this practically powerful, rather than merely philosophically interesting. Desires can be examined, they can be questioned, they can be traced back to their origins. And when you trace them, you will find, almost without exceptions, that the majority of your financial desires did not originate in your genuine needs or your deepest values. They originated in advertising, in social comparison, in the aspirational identity that a brand attached to an object and sold to you alongside the object itself, in the cultural programming that equates certain purchases with certain versions of success, adulthood, attractiveness, intelligence. In other words, most of what you want financially was put there by someone else, for someone else's purse, at someone else poof it, and you have been paying the anxiety tax on it ever since. Carl Jung said the most terrifying thing is to sip oneself completely. But I would add that one of the most liberating things is to examine one's desires honestly, to hold each one up to the light and ask not, do I want this, but who taught me to want this and why, and does this desire actually serve the life I genuinely want to live? Not all desires fail that examination. Some of what you want is genuinely yours, genuinely rooted in your authentic values and your real vision for your life. Those desires are worth pursuing with full intensity and zero guilt. But many will not survive the examination, and every desire that dissolves under honest scrutiny is a piece of mental real estate reclaimed, a portion of your finite attention returned to you, a reduction in the inevitable anxiety tax that wanting extracts from your daily life. This is what Seneca called living according to nature, not foraging in the wilderness. Living in alignment with what you genuinely are, and what you genuinely need, rather than what the marketplace has decided you should want. One powerful exercise is the desire indemnity. Take 30 minutes with a journal and list every significant financial desire you are crankily carrying, everything you believe you need to acquire or achieve financially before your life will feel right. Then ask of each one, where did this desire come from? Is it genuinely mine? Does it lie with my deepest values? And if I acquired it, would I actually feel what I believe it would feel? Be ruthlessly honest, especially with the last question, because the history of your own previous acquisition is the most reliable data you have. And that data almost certainly shows a pattern of arriving and not feeling the arrival and moving the goalpost and beginning again. Remember, every desire you dissolve is worth more to your peace than any amount you could earn to satisfy it. Subtract desire and you subtract anxiety. That is the most efficient financial strategy available to a human being. What Seneca knew about debt that your bank absolutely does not want you to know. Most people think of debt as a financial problem. Seneca understood it as a psychological one. He wrote debt is the slavery of the free. And while he was not speaking exclusively about financial debt, his insight applies to it with a precision that would make him an extraordinary financial therapist if he were alive today. Debt is not just a balance on a statement. Debt is a psychological condition. It is the experience of owing a portion of your future labor, your future life hours, to an institution that charged you for the privilege. It is the content low-grade knowledge that a portion of everything you earn has already been spent, that a claimings on your future that you did not fully understand when you agreed to it. That psychological condition is what creates the specific variety of financial anxiety that debt generates, not just the numbers. The feeling of diminished freedom, the sense that your choices are constrained, that you are working for someone else's profit before you are working for your own life. The Stoic response to this is not a repayment plan. Although practical strategies matter, the Stoic responds begins with understanding why the debt, and in most cases, not all but most, the honest answer involves the same forces we have been examining throughout this exploration: the comparison, the desire forced it, the purchase of an identity through consumption, the acquisition of objects that promised relief or arrival or belonging and that delivered it briefly and then required payment in money and in freedom for years afterward. Most consumer debt is not the result of rational financial miscalculation. It is the result of emotional purchasing, of spending to feel something, to become something, to signal something to others or to yourself. And until that emotional dimension is expressed, the repayment plan is just arithmetic, necessary arithmetic, but insufficient on its own. Seneca wrote, we should every night call ourselves to an account. What infirmity have I mastered today? What passion conquered? What temptation resisted? What virtue acquired? In the kint of debt and financial anxiety, his nightly accounting becomes this: what emotional need did I almost satisfy with a purchase today? And how else did I choose to satisfy it? What comparison did I note activating my desire, and how did I respond? What identity was I tempted to buy, and what did I choose instead? Because freedom from financial anxiety is not primarily a mathematical achievement. It is a psychological one, and psychological achievements, psychological practices. The nightly financial examination, a brief honest review of the day's relationship with money, is perhaps the single most powerful financial practice available, not because of what it reveals about your spending, because of what it reveals about you, about the emotional patterns that your money follows, about the beliefs that are silently directing your financial life without your conscious awareness or consent. That awareness is worth more than any investment, because it compounds. Every day that you examine your relationship with money honestly is a day that the unconscious script loses a little of its grip. And every day it loses grip is a day your financial anxiety is a little less to work with. Remember, your debt is not just a number, it is a story. And like all stories, it begins somewhere. Find where it began. Understand the emotional need it was trying to serve, and then find a different way to serve that need. One that does not cost you your freedom. The paradox of generosity, and why giving is the most powerful financial tool Seneca ever identified. Here is something that will sound counterintuitive if you are experiencing financial anxiety. Giving money away is one of the most effective treatments for it. Not because it earns cosmicas, not because of any metaphysical economy of abundance. For a reason that is entirely psychological and entirely practical, and that Seneca understood with remarkable clarity. Seneca wrote, he was not a good servant will not be a good master. Applied to money, he means something radical. The person who cannot release money, who clings to it with the grip of someone who believes it is the only thing standing between them and catastrophe, that person is not the master of their money. They are its servant. They are governed by it. Their peace is hostage to it. Their identity is fused with it in a way that makes every fluctuation in their financial position a fluctuation in their sense of self. The ability to give, genuinely freely without anxiety, without calculating the return, is proof of a different relationship with money entirely. It is the behavior of someone who knows that their security does not lie in their account balance, who knows that their worth is not a financial metric. Wujo has a rationalized sufficiency deeply and know that releasing some of what they have does not feel like danger. It feels like freedom. Research in positive psychology confirms what Seneca intuited. People give money to others consistently report higher levels of well-being than people who spend the same amount on themselves. The act of giving interrupts the hedonic treadmill. It generates a form of satisfaction that the treadmill cannot habituate to because it is not purchased for the felfun, but more importantly for our purse here. The practice of intentional giving is one of the most direct confrontations with financial anxiety available. It says directly and physically, not just philosophically, to your nervous system. I have enough to share, enough that I can release some without catastrophe, enough that my psyche is not entirely located in this number. That message delivered repeatedly, through repeated acts of genuine generosity, rewires the anxious relationship with money at a level that no amount of reassurance or positive thinking ever reaches. Think about how different it feels to spend money on something for yourself that you weren't sure you could afford versus giving the same amount to something or someone that genuinely needs it. The first leaves a residue of guilt or doubt, or the hollow feeling that the purchase didn't deliver what it promised. The second leaves something clean, something that doesn't demon more, something that is complete in itself. That completeness is a taste of what Seneca called sufficient wealth. The feeling not of having everything but of needing nothing beyond what you already have. Start small if necessary. The amount is not the point. The practice is the point. Identify one area where your financial results can serve something larger than your own accumulation. Give to it consistently, and watch what happens to your relationship with money over the following weeks and moves. Not what happens to your account balance, what happens to your anxiety. Because generosity practiced regularly does something to financial anxiety that no savings rate and no investment strategy ever fully accomplishes. It changed the story from I never have enough to I have enough to give. And that story, lived consistently, embodied physically in repeated acts of generous giving, is the most powerful antidote to financial scarcity thinking. That, remember, the person who cannot give is owned by what they have. The person who can give freely owns their relationship with it. And that ownership is the beginning of real financial freedom. Seneca's ultimate teaching on wealth and the question that changes everything. We arrive at the final and most important principle, the one that contains all the others. Seneca wrote in one of his final letters something that I want you to carry with you long after this exploration has ended. He wrote, "Do not ask for what you will wish you had not got." Read that several times. Let it land. Do not ask for what you will wish you had not got. He was not talking about pessimism. He was not saying don't want things. He was pointing to something far more precise and far more devastating about the human relationship with acquisition. Most of what we pursue financially, when we pursue it and obtain it, does not deliver what we believed it would. It delivers something else. Sometimes nothing. Sometimes the opposite. More responsibility, more maintenance, more visibility, more expectation, more comparison with people who have more of the same thing. The house that was supposed to bring Siki brings a mortgage that chains you to a job you might others have left. The income level that was supposed to bring freedom brings a lifestyle inflation that quietly consumes every additional dollar. The stick purchase that was supposed to bring belonging brings the exhausting maintenance of an image that was never truly you. Most people spend their entire financial lives pursuing things they will wish they had not got. Not because the things are evil, because they purse them for the wrong reasons. Because the reasons were external rather than renal, comparative rather than genuine, driven by anxiety rather than by values. And the true solution, the real solution, is not to stop wanting. It is to want differently. Epictetus said, "Seek not that the things which happen should happen as you wish, but wish the things which happen to be as they are, and you will have a tranquil flow of life." Applied to finance, this means learning to find your sufficiency in what you already have, while pursing what you genuinely value without anxiety about the outcome. That is not passivity. That is the most active, most demanding, and most rewarding financial posture available to a human being. It repures you to know yourself at a level that most people never reach. To know what you genuinely value despite from what you have been taught to value. To know the difference between authentic ambition and anxiety-driven accumulation. To know when enough is enough, not as a defeat but as a victory, not as resignation but as arrival. Most people never arrive. They pursue and pursue and pursue, and the arrival never comes, because they have never divined what arrival looks like in times that are actually achievable, in times that do not automatically generate their next dissatisfaction the moment they are met. Sufficient wealth gives you an arrival that is real, that stays, that does not move when you reach it, not because you have everything, because you have decided what enough means, and decided it based on your genuine values, your orphanage needs, your real vision for the life you want to live rather than the life you have been told you should want. And when you live from that definition of enough, when you wake up knowing what sufficiency feels like and recognizing that you are inside it, something happens to the financial anxiety that has been with you perhaps your entire adult life. It does not disappear overnight, but it begins to lose its grip. One morning you open your banking app and feel neutral rather than afraid. One evening you scroll past someone else deplete wealth and feel nothing. One conversation about money passes without the family or tightening in your chest. These are not small things. These are the signs of a transformation that is happening in the place where all financial transformation actually happens. Not in your account, in your mind. That transformation is a variable to you. It has always been a variable. It was a variable before you made your first purchase, and it will remain a variable long after your last. It does not carry a minimum income. It does not carry a certain level of savings. It does not carry anything external at all. It repairs only what Seneca recoiled, what Epictetus recoiled, what every Stoic who ever lived understood as the foundation of everything else. The decision to look inward, to examine what you genuinely need, to define enough on your own terms, and then to leave as if you already have it. Because in all the ways that actually matter, in the ways that reduce anxiety and increases freedom and a luck a human being to wake up in the morning without that family or weight in their chest. You already have enough, you always did. The work was never to acquire more. The work was to see that clearly, and now you do. As we close this journey through Seneca's teachings on sufficient wealth, carry this with you into every financial decision you make from this day forward. Financial anxiety is not a rational response to scarcity. For most people reading this, it is a learned relationship with money, a script written by forces that benefit from your perpetual dissatisfaction, a program that can be examined, questioned, and rewritten. The Stoic path is not poverty. It is not asceticism. It is not the rejection of comfort or ambition or the legitimate desire for Psyche. It is the most demanding and the most rewarding financial journey available to a human being, the journey inward. To find what enough actually means for you, to live from that definition with conviction, to discover that the piece you were trying to buy was never for sale. It was always yours. Embracing these principles will not make every financial challenge disappear, but it will change your relationships to every financial challenge so fundamentally that they stop deafening your peace. You are stronger than your financial anxiety, wiser than the system that created it, and more than enough exactly as you are. If this reaches something real in you, if somewhere in this exploration you recognize the truth about your relationship with money that you need to hear, subscribe to this channel. Share it with someone who is exhausted by financial anxiety and ready for a different way. The next video is waiting, and what it explores will take everything we have built here even deeper. Watch the next video on your screen to keep building the financial freedom that begins inside. Thank you for walking this path with us. You are part of Jordan Walsh, where every step inward led you forwards. And when you are ready, come back. We will be right here, building the silence that holds real wealth.